Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, thank you, Ross, for that presentation. Appreciate it so much. Question for you. Was there a COVID moment when you knew everything was about to be different? If you want to put some answers in the chat bar, feel free to do so. Mine was really clear. I'm going to share my screen here really quick. It was this moment right here. This is my Instagram feed. I was on a study leave. I was feeling the flow there clearly. I'm excited about these words and this new book. I'm drinking a margarita and enjoying some salsa, some guacamole, kind of having the time of my life, really enjoying what's happening when all of a sudden, ding, 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 my phone goes off and the NBA had closed. Of all the things that would have set it off for me, not the World Health Organization deeming a pandemic, it was, oh my gosh, this is really serious. The NBA had closed. So that's the last time I was in a restaurant. That was March 11. Here is March 12. My wife and I were fortunate to celebrate our 15-year wedding anniversary in a cleaning aisle at the grocery store. Happy 15, buying a bunch of cleaning products for church, for churches, for our own home, for our neighbors' homes, because we found a store with some cleaning items. Fascinating days. That's March 12. March 13, our new churches, I remember they were messaging about how the world are they going to do communion in a pandemic while remaining in their worship spaces. March 14, fast forward a whole nother day, our churches were moving to online worship. March 15, the COVID-19 death rate reached 61 in the United States and 4 in Canada. Fast forward 71 days, and here we are. The pandemic has taken hold. It's happened. It is happening. It's going to continue to happen as the ripples from the coronavirus will now be with us for decades. May 21, over 93,000 deaths in the States and 6,000 deaths in Canada. Dr. Velamati Karkanen was my systematics professor at Fuller Seminary. I especially love his work on a theology of the church or ecclesiology, and he has marked this question in my brain, and I'll never forget it, especially in his thick accent. He would say over and over again, "What makes the church church? What makes the church church?" It's a fun question. People have been having many conversations for 2,000 years about this. But in light of our stay-at-home orders, the question that has become, this question I feel like has become more poignant than ever. You know, this is a lot of what Ross just talked about. Ross, thank you for that. And for the titles of your sections, my goodness, what a gift. From my limited perspective, this unique season of COVID-19 will drive many churches to actually face this question, what makes the church church? For the first time, actually, as we further shed the Christendom skin that many of us are still holding on to. With a hopeful heart for a robust ecclesiology, we rapidly put together a 46-page ebook the first week of COVID to help people with some of the key frames and questions that we thought were probably going to go toward helping people adjust into a thriving COVID-19 church context. I don't have time to cover this whole book, but I am going to run through two of the sections, one of them very briefly and one of them more extensively, to kind of set the stage for an essential breakout group that we're going to have after this in about 13 minutes. If you haven't downloaded the book yet, please download the book. I'll put it in the chat bar right here. Did Brendan already do it? Yep, Brendan already did it. Thanks, Brendan. Appreciate that. So please download that book, and it's a free ebook, and you'll be able to use it during your conversation breakout, as well as hopefully afterward. So yeah, I'm going to cover two of the sections. Section one, we're going to be looking like big picture priorities from 30,000 feet. That's going to be really brief. And then section 2, going to really land the plane, get on the ground, and implementing 4 different sectors in most new churches and existing churches. So section 1, let's begin. Big picture priorities, 30,000 feet. What do we need to do? How do we need to shift to be a COVID church? A church in the midst of COVID. I guess a COVID church wouldn't be a good way to say it. A church in the midst of COVID. The first one is promoting community. Right? As we've seen, some churches have done very well. Some churches have done less well in promoting community inside and outside the church. We believe that now is the time where geographical boundaries have been set aside, where any other number of boundaries have been pushed to the edges. And we believe that there's an opportunity to increase both internal and external community at this time. Secondly, missiologically, we believe that we can reach out maybe even better than ever at this time. I've been talking with Andrea Parrott about this, and this is an area where we do feel like people haven't reached the potential of what we can be doing in COVID. How do we reach out in this time? How do we practice God's mission? How do we join God in what God's doing? We believe that we can indeed do this, and that we do need some work here. Thirdly, we think that the big priority of nimble adaptability is really important at this time. Being Presbyterian, the reason I signed up to be Presbyterian is the communal discernment of the Holy Spirit, right? We do that in committees, which are oftentimes made fun of, but realistically, what committees are doing are allowing us to discern the Holy Spirit together. Oftentimes the problem, however, with committees is that nimbleness is not a priority. There's like a committee and then a subcommittee, and the subcommittee has to meet and bring it back to the committee, and that whole rigmarole. That's not acceptable right now for the most part. Being nimble in this adaptability, even while discerning the Holy Spirit in context, is what's going to be really important. Fourthly, giving space to new leaders in our churches. We believe that we can create more on-ramps for churches, for new leaders at this time. New leaders, new offices, new opportunities, people wanting to participate in new ways. How do we onboard those leaders, support them, train them, and walk with them? And then fifthly, especially for those of you that have church buildings in which your churches worship, and you lean sometimes on those church buildings for income streams, we're going to be we're going to be transitioning over into a time where income streams are going to need to be changing. So church starters are used to developing new income streams, stopping old income streams, adapting quickly, but all churches are going to have to get into this process of handling changing income streams. So that's it. 5 priorities, big picture, 30,000 feet, promoting community, missiology, nimble adaptability, giving space to new leaders in churches, and handling changing income streams. Keep those in the back of your mind as undergirding what's going to be super practical now. We're going to land this plane from 30,000 feet and intersect those big picture priorities with 4 key on-the-ground sectors of most new worshiping or witnessing communities and existing churches. We're about to get super practical, and hold on tight because I'm going to go really fast because I want to honor our time here. Okay, so sector number 1 that I want to remind us of is one that a lot of us have been thinking about, and that's what is worship, like the communal worship gathering, look like in the midst of COVID where we can't meet in physical spaces. I have 5 different things that we've seen people do. I would love to share one strength and one weakness with all of them. As you see other strengths and weaknesses in these different ways to do worship in the midst of physical distancing, please include those in the chat box. Let's teach each other. So first is Zoom. You all been on Zoom? You're on Zoom right now. And the strength of Zoom is there is a sense of togetherness in Zoom, which we appreciate. The weakness, however, is technical glitches. Did you all see the Saturday Night Live episode of Zoom Church? I mean, fantastic. If you have not done that, I would encourage you, even right now, go on Google and look up Saturday Night Live church service. Working through technical glitches became very funny in that moment, except for people for whom it's very close. When those technical glitches can be very frustrating. Yeah, so Zoom worship. A second way people have been doing this is through pre-recorded worship services. So the strength in that is that you have full control over the content, and the weakness for that is that there is very little live participation. The third option what we've seen has been live stream. The strength is, I feel like if the Zoom option and the pre-recorded option had a baby, it would be live streaming. You still get to comment and interact with the live worship service like Zoom, but that participation is a bit more at a distance than Zoom is. but does provide much more control for those creating the liturgy, like in a pre-recorded setting. And the weakness to that obviously is technical problems, which can be distracting, similar to Zoom, but also there needs to be like certain levels of competency to be present in order for the like quote unquote production of the event to actually be able to take place. So those three have been most of the new churches that we've seen across cyclical networks in Canada, the United States, and Europe. But there are a couple others, and I'm glad Ross brought one up. The fourth one that we've seen has been home worship. There's obviously a long historical arc behind this one that's all too often been lost by too many demographics of people. Re-engaging this would be very important. The weakness behind this, obviously, is that it's oftentimes disconnected from others and includes a lot of exclusivity within its modality. And then the fifth one is worship in the street. This one, I was actually up in the mountains last Sunday, taking a walk kind of down the main drag, and there it was worship in the street. It was a church building right on kind of the main drag. On the church building, there was a pastor with a microphone and speakers, and he was preaching out to the street. There was people in cars parked and listening. There's people in like portable chairs that were sitting and listening. And it was, it was fascinating to walk by and to listen and to see. The risk of this, the strength in this, obviously, is that this is more public in its witness, which anything we can do to be more public, I feel like is an important thing. And its weakness is that you might risk violating important physical distancing protocols. So that's worship as a sector here, sector number 1 of 4. Big picture, I think after 8 weeks of this now, careful of the new status quo. This is very dangerous right now. Careful of the new status quo. I was talking with my pastor on Tuesday, and he feels it. We've been 8 weeks now of Zoom worship. And it feels like we've just been getting the same pattern, doing the same thing, the same rhythm, and just entering a status quo to keep things afloat until we return to how it was. Well, we all know that's going to be shifting and a new normal is going to be emerging. So it's encouraging to hear him kind of reflecting on how do we continue to worship with one another in a fresh, faithful, and creative way, even in the midst of COVID. So be careful of your new status quo. Secondly, beyond the worship gathering, 168 hours a week, 2 of those hours typically in worship. If you're lucky, like Ross said, that leaves 166 other hours to be Christ's body throughout the rest of the week. I'm going to just hit some real basic things that we've been seeing people do. Practical here. Again, add what you all have been doing here. I'm going to frame it in 2 categories for being the church outside of the communal worship gathering. One is being with others that live in and outside your home. So how do you do things with people outside your home and in your home? And then the second one's going to be just those who are like inside your home. So your family, or if you're by yourself in your home, then what you can do just by yourself. So let's begin with others that live in and outside your home. Some things we've seen have been to host a game night. Lots of fun with that. We've seen lots of Bible studies emerging, obviously. Lots of coffee hours. Lots of happy hours. By the way, last Thursday happy hour previous to this, that was so much fun. Thank you for hosting that, Jen and Matt and Andrea. Amazing. I've seen people create a family story time. I've seen puppet shows for kids. We've seen prioritization of intergenerational storytelling for people to hear each other's stories. Lots of yoga going on, right? Lots of yoga. Lots of bread baking, right? I've seen people taking classes on how to make bread and posting about all their bread making. I've seen virtual concerts from home with various musicians participating. And then the best missiological thing that we've seen that Andrea Parrott and I have noted is forming new partnerships with groups that are really on the front lines against COVID. And then with people that live just inside your home, so the second section here under beyond the communal worship gathering, we've seen people do family discipleship together, finding lots of time and space to be alone, which we find to actually be, interestingly enough, important at this time. People taking online courses. How do you achieve a tech Sabbath in a world where tech is what's keeping us together? People restoring things in their homes, obviously drawing, painting, sculpting, writing songs, building something beautiful. My assistant's favorite one, Brianna, she's going to be sharing later, take a nap. She's been really pressing people and encouraging people, take a nap during this time. God's still going to be active. God's still going to be at work. Just take a nap. My wife's been enjoying cooking things from scratch. And then obviously, as church planters, we need to always be remembering the importance of planting gardens and tending to them. So yeah, get that chat bar going here. What else are you seeing kind of outside the communal worship service? Things that you all have been doing. Be sure to resource each other. Check out those ideas. And yeah, as the Spirit's prompting, be sure to write down anything that you might want to engage in. The third value, the third sector, is what I'm calling them right now, that we want to encourage is leadership. There are many things that are going to need to be let go in the midst of developing a COVID-19 ecclesiology. Leadership, however, is obviously not one of them. So early on, there are some things that leadership's had to take care of, like how to meet. Hopefully your leaders who make decisions have figured out how to meet by this point. And then, beyond that, there's more. But let's start with things like databases. Databases all the more important now in light of not being able to meet together physically. So how do you keep track of people? How do you make sure you're following up and including all people within your congregation? Like, has everyone been contacted and cared for? This is where databases are really important. Secondarily, internet plans. So what are your current internet practices? Like, how do you use social media? How do you use your website? How do you generate content? How do you distribute content? How do you communicate with people? How do you make announcements with people? What needs to change? What needs to be done better? What needs to stop? Do you need outside help here? Who do we need to bring in to help us? All those kind of questions there for internet plans, especially important in COVID-19. I understand this is a jump for a lot of us. I want to always be sensitive to that, but do want to encourage steps with the internet. Third is training our leaders. We talked about the importance. One of the big 30,000 feet values is training and bringing on new leaders. We'll also talk about longer decisions that will need to be made in the course of COVID-19. So those are kind of like the initial ones that we feel like need to be in place. Long-term, hopefully some of these you all have already been getting to, but developing other income streams. This is going to be really important. Income streams are about to change. It's time to put on our shrewd hats. It's time to put on our creative hats. It's time to pray and follow faithfully the breadcrumbs of the Holy Spirit. So how are you developing other income streams? How about growing existing partnerships? Which local and global partnerships do you already have that you want to jump deeper into, that you want to lean into at this time? Important time to be making that decision. Equally as important, I would argue, is ending partnerships. Relationships are dynamic. They're always changing, and sometimes the change that's necessary is ending the relationship. And the church has oftentimes not been that great at this essential activity. So now might be a good time to shift in ending your partnerships. How do you do that well? How do you be Christ's people at the end of a relationship? Really important thing to be reflecting on right now. Also, with regard to leadership, we need to be thinking about finding new partnerships. Again, the best missiological thing me and Andrea feel like you can be doing right now is forging new partnerships with people who are on the front lines of innovating for helping humanity through this COVID crisis. So how might you be able to partner with these groups? What does partnership even mean? What hurdles exist for you potentially partnering with this relationship? We really hope leaders are thinking about this. Obviously, two, evaluating and reorganizing current staff, especially with changing income streams. How do you do that well and sensitively? How do you adapt and change? This is a key question that many of us are having to ask who have staff. And then again, creating on-ramps for new leaders. I heard a story of a church in the Northeast that had officially ordained an elder of technology. This is perfect. Dr. Johnny Ramirez Johnson at Fuller Seminary talks about how we need to be creative in creating new and faithful offices, right? Offices of like the office of technology for the church. All of a sudden, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, how can you be encouraging new offices? How can you be encouraging new leaders into those offices? How can you be following the prompts of the Holy Spirit as you do so? Really important right now for bringing in new leaders. Big picture on this one, after 8 weeks, I'm very worried about leaders that have dwelled more in the technical leadership space and less in the adaptive leadership space. Seems like when COVID happened, there was an initial burst of energy that allowed more technically minded leaders to make the shift into going adaptive in order to get the church to where it needed to be in COVID. Now I'm quite worried for those leaders, though, as the adaptive leadership is not going to be changing over the coming months. We're going to need to continue to adapt, continue to change. And the technical leadership of running status quo programs and just keeping the ball rolling is going to be a big challenge for people right now. So yeah, pray for those leaders. If you identify as one of those leaders, I would strongly consider making sure you have lots of mutual support in this time. And yeah, please, 8 weeks in, the people that I coach that are more technically minded are saying things like, literally, I need to go into a cocoon for 2 weeks in vacation right now. It's because, again, this extreme ratio of adaptive leadership they're having to jump into because of COVID. And then lastly here, finances, just some real practical things again. Fourth sector, finances, that's transfer to online giving. So through websites, through apps, if your church already does that, if you have a certain technology that you use, would you put that in the text box? In our church, we use this app called Tithely, and it's lovely. And the bottom line is the research has shown that when churches change to online giving, that on average, tithing goes up 30%. I would encourage you to move in that direction at this time. Secondly, here under finances, I think we're going to need to be looking at really quick adaptions and changes in budget. I think we might want to say goodbye to the annual budget and start to create quarterly budgets that can quickly shift and change line items. Something to consider for you. Imagining church beyond property management. This is going to be really important as well for those of us that have church buildings, right? The rental incomes are shifting right now. So what does that mean? I hope that it's hopeful for you that maybe your next partnerships might include better missiological partnerships and maybe even more price per square feet in the long term. But again, a lot of churches in my presbytery have leaned on property management as a way to make budgets, and that's now all gone. And that is significant trouble for a lot of churches. If that's your situation, make sure you are having coaching and mutuality to get through that. And the last one here under finances is accessing other funding, grants. Grants have oftentimes been looked at as things for new churches. And there are just innumerable grants that existing churches, and all of them, can get into. In my context, it's grants like through the Lilly Foundation or through Murdoch. In our context, it's grants even for Cyclical, for instance. There's this government support grant that we wrote that helped us to get through COVID. It's called PPP, and we were able to get that. That's like a huge deal for a little nonprofit. So just overall, make sure you're aware of potential grants you can be writing for, and make sure you write, make sure you try, get the word out there, and see if you can land some money to support your church. So there you go. There's the 4 kind of sectors from on the ground. There's worship. There's all things outside of worship. There's leadership, and there's finances. The questions that we have for you will be coming in the chat box now. What's the timing on this? I just put the questions in the chat box. Matt, what's the timing on the breakout groups?
We're a little over time, so we're going to do 15 minutes in the breakouts now. And so on your schedule, you've got a 10-minute break. That's no longer happening because we took a 5-minute break earlier. So that 10-minute break at 11:50 or 12:50 Eastern, that's no longer happening. So we're going to go straight through to 1 p.m. Eastern time. And that'll be Andrew's reflection, and then straight into kind of lunch and concert. So that'll be a longer extended break at that point. So yeah, we've got 15 minutes right now.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So the questions before you: your name, your context, why you're joining this conference, which are the big bucket priorities in your church, what are you best handling, which needs the most attention, which new priority would you add to this list and why, and then similar, which church sector is your church best handling, which sector needs the most improvement, and which sector would you add and why. Thanks so much for allowing me to share with you. Good to be with you. Look forward to the rest of the day.